Okay, so we are back with our second episode of this podcast that we just started, and I have to say I was quite amazed on the results so far. So we had at least a couple of hundred listeners, which is I think is quite impressive in the media landscape as we see it. So how do you how do you improve something that's already good? Well, we choose someone who's a little more or even a topic maybe even a little more controversial and the last one. So before I or we dive into anything, I'm gonna wish my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Hatim, the literally the sport fanatic whisperer from from the Middle East, a man who knows more than most of us will ever do, has probably forgotten more than most of us will ever know. Okay, still, Dr. Hatim, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, and on the other side, the I was going to say the man from down under, but obviously he's not from down under. He's not from Australia. It's just a little further. He's not even a little further down under. Tony, our great physicist and just people person from South Africa. Welcome, Tony.
Well, thank you,
Tony.
Ovid.
Yeah, there you are. Okay, so your picture. I have a picture of you, and the picture is lagging. But that doesn't matter. Me, I'm your lucky host, the guy who gets to host it for now, or host it. It's probably not the right. I get to introduce it at least, and that's nice. So I'm Arvid. I'm from Norway. And today we are going to talk about Donald Trump and his tariffs and what that means for sports. Um, a little backdrop. I do believe that most people are aware of that Donald Trump had his first 100 days in the White House yesterday, and he's quite driven by his own success. Can we put it like that? And for him to make his mark, and what a mark he's made. Tariffs. Let's go, Doctor. What is your initial take on Donald Trump's actions on tariffs and sports?
Yeah, obviously the immediate impact is started outside of sports in
Hmm.
major manufacturing, vehicles, um, rare earth,
Metals.
very important sectors. However, it's starting to have an impact on sports,
Hmm.
um, starting with the retail, with the sales, with the stock prices of companies like Nike and Adidas, um, due to manufacturing their products in countries like China, Vietnam. Um, so yeah, it's starting to have an impact,
Hmm.
and it is impacting stock prices as well as price that consumer pays at the cashier in the U.S.
Hmm. Tony, I'm going to throw the question further to you. Why would BMW sponsor the New York Yankees if they can't sell their cars in New York?
Well, the question that you ask is kind of the first thing that jumped into my mind when I heard about the tariffs. I thought, how is this going to impact sport globally? So, sport, which should in effect be a global circular economy, is going to not look like so much of a circular economy. Was my first thought, but then my second thought was, actually this might actually speed a couple of things up and force change and innovation, because those who are wanting to change will find ways to make a benefit
Hmm.
out of this and not just sit back and allow allow bad news and rot to start setting in. So to answer your question directly, how is BMW going to sell cars when they're sponsoring a truly American team? Is a really good one. And my first answer to that would be, well, I guess innovation. And I guess what we could unpack a bit of, maybe not right now, but what is a sports partnership and what is a sports sponsorship and what does it look like? Because the knee-jerk reaction is going to be, oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, this is a bad thing. And if we actually think about it, it might not be. Um, but I'm going to leave that thought
Uh-huh.
for now and circle back to it a little later
Yeah.
in the discussion.
Okay, because I just on top of mind. So we have the World Cup in football. Obviously, that's happening in the United States, and then we have the Summer Olympics, also happening in the United States within Donald Trump's presidency. And I'm kind of always coming back to, if at the end of the day there are C-suite managers that has to make a call. They had to execute an order and say, okay, we're going to spend this much money, and in these cases it's a lot of money. It's not pennies. It's a lot of money on deals that literally can be ashes, like ashes in the mouth. It's I mean like Visa, they are selling their service throughout the world, and it has been a major sponsor for almost every major tournament for the last 50 years. Now, if they can't sell their services in China, they can't sell them in Norway, they can't sell them in South Africa, they can't sell them in Great Britain, or they can sell them, but it's like it's going to be an added charge of 134% on top of every transaction. That's not viable. How are these big, massive tournaments gonna go out and find the money they need now?
Well, what are they selling is the question. Are they
Yeah.
selling fan engagement and IP, or are they selling
Hmm.
brand real estate and people in and bums in seats? It's a good, because we hit a fork in the road in terms of what is being sold. That's one thing in a world where the ability to sell something that was intangible uh, was a vague concept. So, for
Hmm.
example, if you just look at what the definition of money is, I mean, money is effectively a store of value. So
Yeah.
you'd often sell a good for a good, or a service for a good, or a service for a service. But as it's becoming easier and easier to sell services globally,
Hmm.
you know, how does, and this is maybe a question more than a statement, but how do tariffs get imposed on services globally?
Well, that's actually easier than you would think. But let's try this from another angle, because this is kind of factual. Let's take it into a little more theoretical approach. Dr. Hatim, your expertise is in people management skills. What is happening in boardrooms and C-suits throughout the world right now when it comes to, not, and I get sponsoring is probably not the major concern for BM or for Audi. I saw Audi had, like, I thought think they have a couple of million cars built in Mexico for the US market now stranded in Mexico. So obviously there are major concerns that in that sense. But for the C-suit, what are they thinking right now? I mean, like on a personal level, because it's their head on the block.
It is their head on the block. Um, Uncertainty.
Yeah.
They are trying to grapple with uncertainty right now. They're
Mm-hmm.
looking for their teams to bring them data that makes sense as far as how these tariffs and how the entire supply chain is being disrupted because of these tariffs. Do
Mm-hmm.
they change the place where they manufacture? How much does it cost to do that? Um, does that make things worse or bad or better? Those are the kind of questions that they're asking in the boardroom right now. Uncertainty.
Yeah, and because, well, at least from my experience as a consultant, for as a management consultant, obviously, risk is what you are playing against, to put it like that. I read some interesting story about it. It was kind of like I said, from a personal or from a private point of view. For you as a person, it's more important for you to be afraid of a wolf than to be happy to find a cake. So obviously, to guidance through personal risk is quite common. And why would any executive officer put their head on the block right now and throw $2 billion into the Summer Olympics?
The answer is probably the wolf.
Yeah.
As you say very clearly, very it's a good point. We are more motivated by fear of pain than we are by desire for pleasurable things. So yes, they will probably retreat and sit and watch and not make any move that they would have normally made when there was less uncertainty in the market. It's a good example, the wolf and the cake. So what you get out of this is this like shrinking that is caused by psychological fear of
Mm-hmm.
uncertainty, and this shrinking is a kind of can be a downward spiral because as they think twice or not even invest in something they would have invested in, like a team or a stadium, then they will slowly build this deflationary um, wave, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
simply
Yeah.
by fear of decision making,
So decisions will be postponed.
Can
postponed or be
I
made more conservatively.
ask a question?
Yeah, I was going to give the word to you after Tony, because I was thinking about to ask you how will this affect the the decision making in and amongst teams and federation, because as you can see clearly there will be hesitations from management C-suite in major companies when it comes to outlays, especially in sponsoring stuff like that. How will that affect sports in general? What's your take? It's a dog eat dog world, finding money already.
Um, can I ask a question? And I'm not sure, maybe
I
it's
just
more of a
asked you a
question as
question.
opposed to a statement.
Yeah, yeah, no,
So
no.
it was, was that
There was a
that was a
question
statement
aimed
dressed
at
up as a
you.
question. So okay,
Yeah.
I won't. Okay, so I won't answer a question with a question, but I will make a statement. Is the last time there was a global disaster was not too
Hmm.
long ago.
No.
Um, So when mid to late 2019 rolled around, that's when COVID popped up, and everyone who was scared of risk retreated into a corner, and then there was a certain segment of society that didn't. And we sit here 5 years later on something like Riverside, having a podcast for three areas, three different spots in the world, and which would have been less likely to have happened pre-COVID. So what ended up happening, there was a massive innovation shift for
Hmm.
those who were more interested in the cake than the wolf. So I'm not trying to be, I'm not arguing, but I'm saying the devil's advocate. Being a devil's advocate, I could look at it and go, well, if the risk is well enough, um, is qualified well enough, you might end up finding that yes, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage and a lot in money lost, but you might also find there's going to be a lot of shifting and changing into the way that sponsorships and partnerships are sculpted. And
Hmm.
I'm not a predictor of the future, so I can't say exactly what's going to happen. But there's definitely going to be a shift of some sort, and whether that's in the areas of human performance, or whether that's in engagement, fan engagement, or whether it's the shift or in the dynamics of how sports actually operates. Whether it's actually to the level of changing entire the way that major events and federations are
Hmm.
structured. I think it would probably get to that level because something has to happen. Because, and I'll leave this as my closing thought on this one, is people aren't just going to abandon sport because they're scared.
Yeah.
It'll evolve and adapt, and then the finances will go along with it, because people, to save their sanity, will probably still want to watch sport. Sorry,
Yeah.
that's my 2 cents worth. I'm not
I,
very
I'm
optimistic view on it, but
no, but I'm agreeing with you. I'm not believing in any way that sponsorships will disappear. But as I said, right now, and that's obvious because yeah, we can talk about the risk factor inside the sponsorship, and that's a major factor. On the other hand, the marketing director or marketing manager or chief of marketing inside Coca-Cola still have a responsibility to bring that product out. So obviously, a lot of things going to happen at the same time. They're going to do public relation campaigns. They're going to do lobbying, and having ambassadors helping them doing that. That's probably a smart play. So obviously, there are things that's going to happen. But I'm just
If I may add to
yeah,
that,
yeah,
um, so I agree with what Tony said, that innovation can be an outcome of this. But you don't know which way the innovation is going to go. I mean, it could be innovation in how to isolate the product from such like out of the blue
hmm
decisions of tariffs.
yeah,
So instead of saying, okay, how do I ship 2 million iPhones so that I don't have to pay tariff on them, they just say, well, I need to figure out how to sell more iPhones outside of the US, so then I can produce in China and sell
hmm
in Europe or in the Middle East or in Africa. So
yeah.
there's going to be a shift in innovative marketing strategy as to, where do we sell. And for the longest time, the US has been historically the most
Lucrative.
lucrative,
Yeah.
fertile market for people to buy, and that's still the case.
hmm
But if it comes at such a high price that the profits start dwindling, they're going to have to get creative on what other markets do I sell my product. If I can fabricate them
Yeah.
outside the US and sell them outside the US, bingo, I'm out of this tariff problem.
Yeah, and that yeah, okay, that
And the
makes
same
perfect
applies to
sense. Yeah.
sponsorships.
Yeah.
Like instead of Visa, I want to talk about the World Cup later,
Mm-hmm.
but in terms of innovation, as you said, Tony, Visa will figure out a way to sponsor really lucrative teams, but they are not impacted by the tariffs.
Exactly.
No, but this is obviously it's interesting, and I was going to try a kind of an idea on a cat amongst the pigeons, because wouldn't it be natural to see the money? You were talking about it, Dr. Hatim, but to watch the money maybe consolidate in other markets and other sports and other events.
It's
I mean,
possible.
like you have the Saudi league in
Yeah.
football, in golf, countries with almost no tariffs at all, and amazing trade agreements with everyone because they're selling oil, and everyone wants oil. Nobody wants to put tariffs on oil because that
No.
means you leave yourself out of the energy mix.
Yeah,
Tony,
no, a country like Saudi Arabia, I am
yeah,
in Riyadh right now
yeah,
visiting. They're pushing really hard on sports investment,
mm
and that's in terms of sponsorships, in terms of infrastructure,
yeah,
in terms of having sports facilities for sports medicine, sports psychology, sports performance.
mm
Big investment, and it's congruent. The whole
yeah,
country is pushing for it, and some of the money that may have been going to the US may be going to the Middle East, which is
yeah,
also a very lucrative market. And
yeah,
that's a case in point right now with the
mm
World Cup 2034 here in Saudi.
yeah.
They're building up that nice market of, you should start coming and become the preferred sponsor for this stadium or this amazing state of the art facility.
You, Tony,
So,
you've been in the Middle East as well. What is your take on this?
so it's a very interesting one, and it's a very smart, it's a very smartly played and strategic a move that the Middle East in general has played. I think they're about at their time and really have struck when the moment's right. And this is over the last, say, decade at least. Um, Before I get onto that, I think it's quite important to maybe just unpack it to the level of somebody who's listening to this, for them to understand why sport, why do people invest in sports, why are stadiums built, why do athletes
Mm,
strive harder, why all the
smart.
television. I mean, there's a big why behind that. And I mean, the quick answer is obviously for a number of reasons. Sport is fun to participate in. Sport is fun to watch. Sport doesn't have boundaries. Sport crosses borders. It crosses cultures. It's something everyone can do. It's physical. It's good for you. Blah 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 blah. But from a brand perspective, is what sport does, where the commercial upside lies, is that sports unlocks doors, and sports opens relationships. So whether it's a case of a brand getting behind a sport for the sport to open up networks for them to improve their business operations, or if
Mm,
it's a brand getting behind a sport purely to show that they have got a good reputation or they are visible, whatever the reason is that one of the commercial reasons that sport becomes so interesting. So when it circles back to, well, what's going to happen in terms of sponsorships, and where are we now? Where does the Middle East come into all of this? Well, it's a really good question, because I think there's a general misunderstanding that sports sponsorship's all about the winning team, or putting a logo on a jersey of the team that wins in order to get a couple of pictures and to see your brand on TV. That's what the sort of the surface level thinking is in terms of sponsorship. But where countries and regions have got it right is when they start looking a little bit further to say, okay, that's all good and well, but what what,
mm,
what else can we offer for brands or companies to showcase themselves in using sport as a vehicle? And one of I'd say there are three really big areas. Um, the one is inclusion in sport, equality in
mm,
sport, women's sports. There's a massive drive behind that, and Saudi is showcasing that extremely well at the moment. Another huge area is sustainability. Saudi is
yeah,
also doing a very good job in showcasing that. And then the third thing is grassroots development. So that is
yeah,
building from the ground up, not necessarily buying your players, your athletes, but creating homegrown ones that are truly native to your country and showcasing those ultimately to become champions. So where the Middle East is actually ticking a whole bunch of really smart boxes at the moment, is that
yeah.
they are literally focusing grassroots, homegrown, building them from the ground up. They're focusing in inclusion in sport. They're focusing very much so in sustainability, and all of that combined results in performance. So
Mm,
why would you not want to get involved with the Middle East in some way or form? Because they are literally ticking every single box that any brand could ever want to get involved in and tell their story through sport. And that's going to do is that's going to cultivate an entire ecosystem. And that, to me, speaking completely objectively, as somebody who understands sport very well and has been intimately involved in it for many years, sees a mega player um, doing everything right, not
yeah.
showcasing, nothing bravado, nothing on the surface. No, your bark is louder or harder than the bite, but actually attacking it from all areas and
Mm,
showcasing what it actually should look like. And the rest of the world, I kind of think, realizing now that's kind of how the model should be done. So I think gone are the days where, and I stand to be corrected, I'll probably open myself up for some criticism, and I welcome it. Is that where certain clubs are seen to buy players? So it's very easy to go throw money at someone from another country and bring them on, and you can have a name that is completely different to what your culture is, but they still represent your culture just because it's kind of convenient. I think it's going to be a bit less and less of that. And for me, and I know I'm taking an optimistic view on this, but if more countries had to almost adopt a Middle Eastern rule in terms of sports development, the world would actually become a more competitive space in terms of high level or
mm.
elite sports from a performance perspective. I know it's quite a lot to consume, but
No,
it's a circular economy. It makes sense.
I have an example of that and how these things have disrupted industries before. Um, this was like the Japanese car industry when it kind of came. You know why they broke into the U.S. market back in the day? What was the real reason for it? The thing was that in Japan they had been building small cars due to the space, basically, because Tokyo is a huge city, 50 million people, and they need small cars. And then in 71, 72, you had the oil crisis, which all of a sudden there was a massive demand for small efficient cars throughout the world, and especially United States, and they came into that market. And I'm not going to say they took it over, but the fact is that Detroit in the late 60s was the world's richest city, and 15 years later was more or less bankrupt. Can we see somewhat of the same kind of shift now? Sports, you have these big franchises that's been built over many years, but US sport, remember, US sport is franchise based. They've been moving cities all the time. So in theory, you can move these franchises or the ID behind it also to the Middle East.
Let me take this one, Arvid.
Yeah.
So I lived in the U.S. for 37 years, and it struck me. I went when I was 17, 18. And what struck me is how insulated the sports marketing field was back then in the 80s, where you had American football was really just for North America, for the U.S. Mostly, a couple of teams in Canada, and
Mhm.
then baseball was pretty much all U.S. and some in Canada, and all the sports marketing was all domestic. It was like nobody from outside of the U.S. cared to sponsor a baseball team, and vice versa. The sponsors had plenty of market, plenty of consumers, plenty of bums on the seat exposure through a very mature also media scene.
Mhm.
Fast forward 30 years, 40 years, and sports like football, F1, tennis, and other cricket even have started to really grow to levels that started to rival the same level of popularity that football, American football, and baseball had, and that's when the co-sponsoring started happening, where you started seeing European brands and Asian brands sometimes um, on football jerseys or basketball jerseys. Started with basketball. Now it seems like these tariffs are gonna put that pressure back on again to separate
Mhm.
the sport from its native. So the sponsors will be from the native country, um, and those sponsors are going to go back and say, okay, nah, this is not working anymore. It's costing me too much. Let me find a good team. Let me find F1 or football or volleyball even, where these are also very popular in some South American countries and European countries, and of course, football in Africa is is uh,
Massive.
is king. Yeah.
Mm. No, but this is interesting. I feel that we could probably sit here to at least a couple of days talking about this. We're not going to do that. So we passed the half an hour mark with bravura. That was quite easy. So I think we're gonna try to end it here. Some last thoughts, Tony. Some last thoughts, Hathim. Both of you.
Yeah, I wanted to touch for just
Yeah,
1 minute about the World Cup and also the Cup of Clubs that's coming up
yeah.
in June here. In addition to tariffs, and I know the subject here was tariffs, but
Mm,
there's also issues for people visiting the United States. So at the same time that
mm.
tariffs has been put, the Department of Homeland Security is cracking down on people entering the country. I'm talking about tourism
Yeah,
and H-1B, and I know a lot of people who are traveling from all over the world to watch the Cup of Clubs coming up in
yeah.
June, which is a first. Everybody was excited it was happening in the U.S., and that's going to dampen that. So the results on sports marketing is you're going to have less, eyeballs watching that sponsorship that you have paid a lot of money for, thinking you're going to get complete ease and flow of people to there. The second thing I wanted to touch on and is for the World Cup, even the price of steel and aluminum for building these stadiums
Yeah.
in Mexico, US and Canada is going to suffer, making
Mm.
the whole enterprise a little bit less profitable. So it's kind of shooting themselves in the foot here for two big events that people are fighting to get, and it's happening in the US, and it may have less impact financially than they originally intended.
So the really not the trickle down effect they wanted.
Yeah.
Quite the opposite. Tony, do you have some last thoughts?
So yeah, just something popped into my head, and it's again something I'd like people to think about is that when there's a big shift that appears to be a dampener, which this,
Yeah.
this is for a lot of people, and a company is feeling threatened because they stand to lose a significant amount of money, they've got two options. They either stop marketing or they double down on
Yeah.
marketing. Now, if you
I think no,
consider that
I think
everything
that
I've been speaking about is,
yeah.
hang on, let me finish. What I've been saying the whole way through is that having been an athlete in my life, when you're the athlete, it's all about the sport. But when you come
Mhm.
to realize that the main interest is commercially driven and it's mainly about money, that
Yeah.
brands want to make money off sports, and for all intents and purposes, most, if not all, sports partnerships and sponsorships are directly related to marketing, whether it's explicit or implicit, i.e., whether you're literally buying exposure or you're doing it through relationships. It falls under the category quite squarely within marketing. So this is where companies need to make a decision. Are we going to scale back and push it elsewhere? Or are we going to double down into sport and find new ways? And this is what I've been saying, is this is where the innovation driver is going to come in, and we're going to see some things that none of us expect.
And that was where I wanted to leave it because I love the statement. You can stop or you double down. And there's no one here that believes they're going to stop. So thank you, Dr. Hatim.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Tony. It's been a great pleasure, as usual. I'm not going to use a profanity because that closes down something on Apple. But however, no, this was awesome. Have a great day. See
Thanks.
you guys again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, gents.
Okay.
Have a
Take care.
lovely
Thanks.
weekend.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everyone.
Okay. Then
Take care.